What's that? Wow. All right, well, we get to wrap up the book of John this morning. It's going to be exciting, riveting. I'll do my best. But be thinking about your favorite moments in John. It's been a long winter in the book, so don't fight the temptation to spend all your mental energy on the next 30 minutes on coming up with something great to say. I'm not going to like you better if you have something great to say and eloquently share it or anything like that. But just let your mind think about your favorite moments or your most challenging moments or what you got out of the book of John, and maybe we'll have some time at the end to share about that. So, yeah, let's just go over this last chapter here. Technically, we're covering the last half of chapter 21, but it's all one little story here. And I think John answers some key questions, right? So in the story of John, we have, of course, this lingering question: what happens to one of the main characters, Peter, right? He denied Jesus. What's going to happen to him? So we need to wrap that up. And then I think, too, there's kind of this lingering question as a reader of, remember the end of the last chapter, Bob mentioned this as well. Okay, many other signs Jesus performed, but these have been written so you may believe. Well, most of us here would say that we believe. And so I think to the reader, though, there's kind of this question looming: now what? So I believe, now what? And so John kind of wraps up these two things. So Jesus appears on the seashore. There's 7 disciples out fishing. Day is breaking. Jesus stands on the beach. He tells them, cast your net over here. They get some fish. They realize, whoa, it's Jesus. Peter, of course, zealous as always. They worked pretty much naked out on the boat. So he throws on his cloak, dives in the water, and heads for shore. Never mind that the other 6 guys now had to do all the legwork to get the fish in, right? So that's just kind of the nature of Peter. We'll see more of that today. And the author says, oh, it's Jesus. He's the one who recognizes him. And when they get out, Jesus has a nice breakfast ready for them. I'm sure the sun was just coming up. It was beautiful. No wind, calm. Birds were singing. Frogs were chirping. Whatnot. I'm sure it was a beautiful morning. And they eat breakfast, and when they had finished breakfast, here we are in verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, shepherd my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will clothe you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now this he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. That's Peter. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back on his bosom at supper and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? So Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Whoops, sorry, excuse me. Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Therefore this saying went out among the brethren that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who has testified to these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, which if they were written in detail, I suppose that even the world itself would not contain the books that would be written. So first of all, let's talk about the reinstatement of Peter. So Peter's last main interaction with Jesus was what? Before the crucifixion. I will never deny you, right? He says, and then of course he denies him 3 times, and what he actually says is, I will die for you. I would lay down my life for you, Jesus. And then he goes on and he denies him 3 times. And so I'm certain that there was more conversation between Peter and Jesus than what's recorded right here. But Jesus, 3 times, asked Peter to affirm his love. But the first time he phrases a question, right? Do you love me more than these? So we have to ask, well, what are these? What are more than these? Well, there's kind of 3 possibilities. The first one might be, do you love me more than these fish, this beautiful morning, breakfast on the beach, right? So we could say, is Jesus asking Peter, do you love me more than this world and all the good stuff, more than a hard day's work and the satisfaction of that? And that's a valid question, right? But I don't think it fits the rest of the story here. It doesn't answer the question, well, what about Peter denied him? So what if he loves Jesus more than the world? He denied him. So I don't think that's the right sense of what are these. There's another sense. He could be saying, Peter, do you love me more than you love these other disciples? Do you love me more than your friends and family? And these men that you've been hanging out with for 3 years now. Again, a valid question, right? Do you love me more than you love these other people? Again, valid question, but I don't think it fits. It doesn't answer the question, right? Well, what about Peter? He denied Jesus 3 times. So I think the right one, personally, is, does Peter love Jesus more than the other disciples love Jesus? I think that's the question Jesus is asking Peter. Do you love me more than these other disciples love me? Right? Because that's what Peter claimed back in chapter 13, verse 7. Peter tells Jesus, you can't wash my feet. And then Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part with me. And Peter says, well, then wash my whole body. And then in verse 37, Peter says, I won't leave you. I will lay down my life for you. And then Jesus says, you're going to deny me 3 times. So Peter is set up as this very zealous, idealistic character, right? Who really loves Jesus. And I think he probably thinks he loves Jesus more than these other disciples love Jesus. And he might have, right? He might love Jesus more than I love Jesus, or those other disciples love Jesus. But in response to that threefold denial, Jesus reiterates what really matters. What really matters, right? He says, do you love me? And he doesn't say, look what you did, right? He just says, do you love me? And so we see that in not mentioning what Peter has done, we see that it doesn't matter what Peter has done. So you denied me. That's in the past. Do you love me? Again, he says, do you love me? And he doesn't say, Peter, have you learned yet that you don't love me as much as you claimed to love me? Right? And that's a lesson for all of us, right? We don't love Jesus like we probably claim to love Jesus. We don't love Jesus like we should love Jesus. We don't love Jesus as much as he deserves to be loved. But again, that's not what Jesus emphasizes, right? He says, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? What matters here is what are you going to do going forward if you love me? I'm not worried about what you did. I'm not worried about the level of love that you have for me, whether you realize it's less than it was or whether it is less than it was or anything. Do you love me? What are you going to do going forward? Now, there's a little, I think it's probably the most kind of well-known nugget in the Greek here, right? Jesus, if you're anything like me, you've heard it half a dozen times in your Christian life about how Jesus says, do you love me? Do you agape me? And Peter says no, or no, he doesn't say no. He says, yes, Lord, I phileo you. And Jesus does it twice. Do you agape me? Yes, I phileo you. Do you agape me? I phileo you. And then Jesus says, do you phileo me? And Peter says, yes, of course I phileo you. And much has been made of this because we're told that agape kind of means God's perfect love. Agape is God's perfect love. And phileo is brotherly love or physical affection. And that's true to an extent. For example, here's one use of phileo when Judas goes into the garden to betray Jesus. He says, whomever I phileo, he is the one. And that's translated, whoever he that I kiss, that's the one. That's phileo. So that's just an example of how it's used in a physical sense. But here's another verse just to think about. John 5:20. For the Father phileos the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing. Wait a second. What? God's supposed to just agape. That's greater than phileo. Well, the Father phileos the Son. John 16:27. The Father himself phileos you because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. It's talking to the disciples. So, something's kind of amiss here, right? Luke 7:42, he's given a parable, and two guys have had their debt canceled, and he says, now which of them will agapeo the master more? Well, we're kind of told that we're not supposed to be able to agape. Luke 16, no servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and agapo the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. So, I think there may be some subtle difference between phileo and agape, but I'm not sure we completely understand it. And here's what I know, is that they're used far more interchangeably than we might have been led to believe. And the other thing is, I don't think it changes the meaning of the passage, right? I think the meaning of the passage is, do you love me? What are you going to do about it? Do you love me? The past doesn't matter. Do you love me? What are you going to do going forward? And what does Jesus say to do going forward? It's interesting here. So the NASB says, tend my lambs, shepherd my sheep, and tend my sheep. All the other English translations have feed my sheep in there at least once. Some of them twice, some of them 3 times. So I kind of get the sense that this feed, tend, care for word has multiple connotations to it as well, right? And so some translators have decided, well, food is a theme in John, so let's translate it feed all the way through. And some have changed it up just to make it a little more interesting. Care for my sheep, shepherd my sheep. So here's kind of an easy question. Who are the sheep? In John, who are the sheep? People, specifically followers, right? So we have John 10. John 10 is the passage about I'm the good shepherd, you're the sheep. Jesus says, he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. So first of all, the sheep hear the voice of Jesus. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. So the sheep follow Jesus, or Jesus' sheep follow Jesus, and know his voice. A few verses later, he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own Father, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. And he says later to the Pharisees, but you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. So feed my sheep. Who are my sheep? Well, they're the people who already belong to me, and they're the people that will hear my voice. So it's not everybody necessarily, I don't think. So here's a slightly harder question. In John, what is the food? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. What's the food in John? Ooh, I heard the gospel, I heard abiding, I heard the word. Okay, in John, think back, in John. Jesus, right? What did Jesus say? I am the bread of life. Very good. I am the bread of life. So, in the Gospel of John, let's see, this is John 6:32. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. They said to him, Sir, give us this bread always. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall not thirst. Okay, so we see that in John, Jesus for sure is food. Jesus is the bread of life. There's one more. Anybody? Okay, John 4:34, Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. So Jesus, this is his disciples have just brought him food back from the Samaritan village. He's not worried about eating right now. He sees a bunch of souls coming to be fed, and he says, I'm satisfied right now because my food is to do the will of the Father, the work of the Father. And so food in John is to do God's work. So Peter here is obviously given a a specific commission, right? Do you love me, Peter? Feed my sheep. And of course, tradition has it that Peter goes off and heads up the church. In fact, he was probably in Babylon, where he probably really died, but tradition has him in Rome as the first pope and stuff like that. But this ties into that second literary question that we the readers still have, as we've been challenged, do we believe or not? So, okay, I believe, now what? What about me? What do I need to do? And again, it goes, there's a sense in John, and there's kind of a sense in us, the reader, that this has to go beyond our intellectual assent, right? I believe that God came in the flesh. I believe that he died for my sins. I believe that he rose from the dead, triumphed over evil, sealed salvation in his victory over death, and now he exists as a man at the right hand of God, an emissary, an advocate for us. But now what? And so, to the reader with that question, Jesus has another question. What's the question? Do you love me?
We got one here. Otherwise we get feedback. Just a couple thoughts here. Application, now what? Maybe it fit about 5 steps back. But I just happen to have the experience of raising sheep, real sheep. I also had the experience of being a shepherd of a flock of sheep people. But the two things I want you to think about, or I think about, is it isn't just how we feed them, it's what we feed them, but how we feed them. And I think the tending of sheep says a lot about how we go about either taking care of the flock or initiating people to the flock. How we do it is very, very important. But it's both. Having the right food, and then how do we feed them?
Okay, thank you. All right, so this question, I believe, now what? Jesus says, well, do you love me? So what has Jesus said about loving him repeatedly in John? If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Okay, John 14:15. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. John 15:10. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. And so he offers the reader a solution to the question, right? Do you love me? Feed my sheep. They say, well, that's the specific call to Peter. Well, we found out that food was doing the work of God, and we found out that food was Jesus, offering Jesus to people. So I guess I would argue that feed my sheep is something that we're all called to do. And you might not be, feeding my sheep might not mean that you're the head shepherd of a flock, right? But we're all sheep, right? And sheep run in flocks, so there's sheep all around us that need tending to and caring to. 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give a reason for the hope that you have. What's the hope? It's the hope Jesus died for my sins. Sort of. That's a good introductory line, right? What's the hope? The hope is there's a man who was raised from the dead and is seated at the right hand of God. Caring for my sheep is something that we're all called to do. What did Jesus say? What was Jesus' new commandment? A new command I give you, that you love one another. Love one another. And we talked about that in Sunday school. It's not like loving one another. It's not simply doing good works for each other. When Jesus says love one another, he says, I want you to feel compassion and empathy for each other. I want you to care about other people more than you're worried about your own kingdom and your own flesh. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Offer the person of Jesus Christ to people. Do you love me? Care for my sheep. Love one another. And then what was the final meaning of food in John? It was do the work of God, right? Jesus said, my bread is to do the will of the Father. Now, I don't think this in any way means do the work of God in kind of a generic religious sense. It doesn't mean do the work of God because the world says this or this or this are good things to do. It's not charity in general. That is not, I don't think that's what we're called to. I think we're called to specifically, what is God asking you to do? Why? Because my sheep hear my voice. My sheep hear my voice. I don't just hear kind of a cacophony of sounds from the world saying, good people do good deeds and give money to charity and help the old lady across the street. My sheep hear my voice. Okay, what is Jesus asking you to do? And I want to talk here briefly too about, notice some things that Jesus is not asking Peter to do. Right? I mean, put on your religious cap for a second. Jesus says, do you love me? You know, what are the answers we're kind of expecting in a religious world?
Go to Africa as a missionary.
Do you love me? Go to Africa as a missionary.
Tithe 10%.
Do you love me? Tithe 10% and not a penny less. Or more. In John, the disciples were criticized for not, actually maybe it was Mark. Disciples were criticized for not washing their hands before they ate. Now this wasn't a cleanliness thing like my mom, who would just make you wash your hands before you ate. This was a religious thing, a ritual thing. Jesus cast that off. Do you love me? He doesn't say, wash your hands before you eat in this ritualistic way. Do you love me? Keep the Sabbath. Do you love me? Wear a suit and tie to church. Right? So these are things Jesus does not ask Peter to do. There's one more big one I just want to mention, and foot stomp, because I think it's big in the Gospel of John. Jesus does not say, do you love me? I need you to go to war with sin. And I think Christianity and Christians today are made impotent by this idea that Christianity is a war with sin. Right? Because there's a lot of teaching in here about how to live rightly. But Christianity is not a war with sin. Why not?
Because God overcame it.
Because sin's been overcome already, right? Because we know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. Jesus conquered sin. Jesus conquered death. Sin is not the issue for Christians. Christianity is not a war against sin. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. Okay? What are sins? Sins are indulging this flesh. We are not in a battle against flesh and blood. That's not against other people, and it's not against sin. Sin has been dealt with Past sin has been dealt with. Present sin has been dealt with. Future sin has been dealt with. Now, don't misunderstand me. Jesus is not saying, do you love me? Continue in your sin. Okay? But he's not saying, do you love me? Focus all your energy and all your might on warring with sin. He says, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And I wonder if I spent all my mental faculties and all my energy and all my money on feeding and caring for other people, how much time would I have for sin? How much sinning would I be doing if I didn't take the time to indulge? That's what sin is, right? Sin is the coronation of my flesh, the coronation of me as king. And if I spend all my time feeding sheep, serving people, if I spent my mental energy on how do I love these people, then guess what? I can't spend my mental energy on how I hate these people, the contempt I have for these people. Christianity is not a war with sin. Christianity is about servant leadership. It's about washing people's feet. And it's about doing what God is asking you to do. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Love one another. Do you love me? Abide in my love. All right, and then there's two other little points at the end of this passage. Jesus has just said to Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Peter turns around, sees another disciple, and what does Peter become preoccupied with? What about him? What are you asking him to do? Now, Jesus essentially just told Peter, Peter, you're going to be crucified someday, and that's how you're going to die. So you got that to look forward to. What about that guy, Jesus? And what does Jesus say? What is that to you, right? What is that to you? Peter, I just asked you to do something. Hey, reader of John, I know you're thinking about someone who could really use this message, right? Dear reader, you're thinking about someone that really needs to worry less about themselves and more about feeding other people. And Jesus says, what is that to you? What is it to you if I ask that person to go do this mission over here and you disagree with it? What is that to you? What is that to you if this person... What? Isn't giving enough money to your church? What is that to you? What is Jesus asking you to do? And so Jesus wants you to be, he just wants you to worry about you, right? And not only that, but I would expand that a little bit. Jesus gives you a command, and he doesn't want you to wait until there's a coalition that you can gather. Jesus doesn't say, well, I'm asking you to do this thing, but you should probably ask the rest of your church to participate in this thing with you. Right? Jesus just says, I've asked you to do something. Get up, follow me. What is that to you? And then the last little thing here is another little comment, kind of like the last verse of 20. There are many other things that Jesus did. Many other things. I hear the Bible talked about a lot like it's comprehensive. Like, well, that's not in the Gospels, so that couldn't have happened. Well, the Gospels aren't comprehensive. Jesus did many, many, many more things. John's the only one who records a 3-year ministry. If all Jesus did in the Gospels, according to the first 3, he did it all in the course of a year. We don't really know how long Jesus' ministry was. Might have been 3 years, according to John, but it's not comprehensive. Jesus did many things. And I would add to that, too, that Jesus has been doing many things and is going to keep doing many things for ages and ages and ages to come. So I don't know about you, but I'm excited to meet him in person and be a part of that. And I think that is kind of the conclusion of the book of John. This Jesus, he's amazing. Do you believe? Now follow him. Obey him. Listen to his voice. All right. We've got some time. What are your thoughts about John? What's your favorite thing? What's your most challenging thing?
If I could just make a comment on this last chapter, rather than just an appendage or an addendum onto the end of the gospel, the main theme of John has been the simplicity of the gospel. And as Christians, we so often make the gospel difficult. And I think here in the last chapter, with the example of Peter, as you said, John focuses on the individual responses of the listener, the hearer. And as Christians, we tend often to deflect, to look at the minor details as the major things and gloss over the major point. And we tend to be either overconfident like Peter in our faith and self-aggrandizing and comparing ourselves with other people, or we retreat into unbelieving self-condemnation. And that temptation was before Peter to do both those things. And just the simplicity of walking in obedient relationship with Jesus is brought out here. And I think that's the battle that each of us as believers are left with. Are we going to faithfully walk in relationship with Jesus no matter what God calls the Lord calls other people to do? Not comparing ourselves to others, not looking at our own failings and falterings and say, well, retreating into unbelief. But are we going to continue to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and to walk in a relationship with him?
Well said.
I could talk loud
That's all right. You can't be on the recording no matter how loud you talk.
Well, following up on what Andy said about the simplicity of the gospel, my favorite verse is the first that I ever learned, John 3:16, which simply and very straightforwardly is the gospel. And as I recall, the times that it really hit home to me was when I substituted my name into that verse. For God so loved Gary that he gave his only begotten Son, that if Gary believed on him, Gary would not perish but have eternal life. That's the simplicity of what it's all about. And that is the gospel message, just capsulated and very simply, but very clearly stated.
There's a principle I use in scripture all the time to study or figure it out, and it's two words: if, then. If something is true, if I believe, then. If there's a principle, then how do I apply it? What's it involve me? If I see it as mine, then I do. If, then. I couldn't help but see it in John 22. If you love me, then do something about it. If you love, do. Makes sense.
Yeah, and if, do what? Listen, hear my voice. That's, and, I think sometimes we talk as if, maybe we even teach as if, just becoming a Christian flips a switch in your brain where now you have a special audio channel that you can now hear the voice of God. And under that thought pattern, then every good idea I have becomes the voice of God. But the voice of God is a still small voice. And my heart is deceptive. And I'm still in this body of flesh that wants to elevate myself, that wants to build my kingdom. And if you love me, hear my voice. And hearing God's voice is something that we need to cultivate. It's a learned behavior. We need to learn the sound of the voice. We need to learn to hear it in the cacophony of sounds all around you. Competing desires, competing voices. My sheep hear my voice.
We're called to live our lives so that others wonder what we have, what's inside of us. And that gives us a chance to spread the gospel. Because people are going to ask you, why are you so happy? Why do you smile all the time? What do you have inside of you that makes you who you are? And I guess that's what I like.
So what I'm tempted to say, well, if I'm pretty successful and make a fair bit of money and have a nice family, these are the things that people are going to ask about, right? They're going to ask me, well, why are you happy? And then I'll tell them I'm a Christian. Well, that's me worried about my kingdom, right? Jesus' kingdom is not of this world. So, what's really going to get people's attention in this world? Me sacrificing myself. That's going to turn heads. Me going to Africa to live in a mud hut. That's going to turn heads. So, again, it's not every good idea that I have. No, the bell doesn't mean anything. Are you kidding me?
Well, one of the things in this passage that is spoken to me very strongly is Jesus asking Peter, do you love me more than these? And because he was the one who said, probably one of the last conversations he had with Jesus at the Last Supper was, Lord, if everybody else deserts you, I won't. I'll follow you to the death. Wouldn't we all like to think that? And, and I tell myself, just this prideful idea that, hey, wasn't I serving you and nobody else was? And didn't I go to Bible study when were going to keggers and didn't, or whatever it is. I mean, and, our flesh is weak. And we're gonna fail. And our Jesus knows us better than anybody else. And he knew Peter was gonna deny him. And he actually told all the disciples that you're all gonna scatter. And they all did. And here we find Peter, the one who's all broken up about it, as if he was the only one. And, the Spirit of God can enable you to do exactly what you feel in your flesh. Because Peter actually is going to do what he claimed he would do. But not in his own power, he's not going to do it. And the motivation of love. Duty can motivate you for a while, and don't we all want to be good Christians? But, servants perform duties. And Jesus said, I'm no longer calling you servants because a servant doesn't know what his master's doing. But I've called you friends. And so he says, Peter, do you love me?
Yeah, great point, too. Servants see a need and they say, well, I'm on the clock. Right? Friends see a need and drop everything.
Out of love. And that really is, that motivator is a whole lot stronger than duty. Is to really love and to love God and to love you first. And so you can love in that way. And do what you can't do in yourself.
Yeah, and is Jesus worried about how much you love him? Not really, right? He wants you to love him more, but he will meet you right where you're at. If you say, Jesus, I am realizing that I don't love you nearly as much as I thought I did 10 minutes ago, 10 years ago. Jesus doesn't care. Gary.
It's really not about how much we love Jesus. It's about how much he loved us.
That's right. It's not about how much we love Jesus. It's about how much he loved us. Absolutely. Any last thoughts? Ben.
The reality is that there are those of us that are going to walk out of this room and be incredibly tempted to go fishing. And we're going to be fraught with this notion that, hey, I just sat through almost 8 months of sermons on the book of John, and I know it. Or, hey, this was a really great culmination of thoughts in my head and takeaways or practical applications, and that's something. But let's obey. Let's obey. It's going to look obvious when we do.
Yeah. What is Jesus asking you to do? Anybody else? We've got all day. It's cloudy outside. All right, well. Love one another. Feed my sheep. That's what the Gospel of John is all about. Have a good summer. Actually, we're doing Sunday school for another month, I think, in First John. So stick around for that.
Over John.